After months of testing and many hours on the trail spent tweaking and adjusting suspension, I can finally reveal that the 2019 Women's Trail Bike of the Year is the Liv Intrigue Advanced 1. Liv market this bike with the tagline "Play the Trail," which gives you a good indication as to the purpose of it. It's built as an all-round do-it-all trail bike, designed to be good at climbing, good at descending, and pretty much everything in between. The version of the bike I rode was the Liv Intrigue Advanced 1, which retails at £3,999, $5,565 US dollars, or 6,299 Australian dollars. The 140mm of rear travel is controlled by a Fox Float DPX2 Performance shock. And at the front of the bike, the Fox 36 Float Performance Elite with Fit4 damper forks provide 150mm of travel. In terms of angles, we're talking fairly standard for a trail bike, so 66.5 degree head angle and 74.5 degree seat angle. The rest of the group set consists of SRAM GX Eagle with SRAM Guide RS brakes. Finishing kit is all Giants with the exception of the saddle, which is a Liv forward geometry saddle, and the wheels are made up of Giant Level 2 hubs with TRX1 rims and Sapim spokes. The tyres are Maxxis High Roller 2s with Evo casing, 2.5 on the front and 2.4 on the rear. One of the first things you notice when you pick up this bike is how light it is. It weighs in at 12.79 kilograms for the size medium that I rode, and that's without pedals on it. So it's really quite impressively light, and without mentioning anything else, that alone really helps in terms of efficiency when climbing. When you combine that lightness with quite a short reach and the steeper seat angle and the efficiency of the Maestro suspension system, you get a bike that pretty much accelerates uphill. So you have a really direct feeling when you put the power on the pedals, you're flying uphill, and that's really pleasing. If climbing's not your thing, you will feel like a climbing goddess with this bike. On the flip side, that reach, which is 432mm on my size medium, became a bit of a problem on longer technical descents. So while it's nice and short, which makes it quite manoeuvrable on the ups and on tighter terrain, it did mean that I didn't have quite the platform for stability on the descents, particularly on the technical descents, that I would have liked. Now, I do sit right at the top end of the size range for the medium, so I think that if you sit more towards the middle or the lower end of the range, you wouldn't have that problem, but the bike does size up quite short. So if you sit towards the top end of the height ranges for any of the sizes, I would definitely recommend testing the size above just to see how that feels. I'm 5'8" and a bit, which I think is about 174 centimetres, and I maybe could have got away with a size large if there was one available, except for the seat post and the seat tube height. Now, the seat tube height on this bike is already fairly high, and I think if I went up one, I would find it hard to get the saddle low enough for me to feel comfortable on descents. The other problem is this bike comes spec'd with a 100mm dropper seat post from Giant, and in my opinion that's just not long enough for a bike for this purpose. So when I had it at the right heights for pedalling, I couldn't drop it low enough for descending, and so I ended up either having it somewhere between the two or compromising one or the other, which is a shame because this bike rides so well otherwise. Now, this is partly because of the kink in the seat tube, which means that you can only fit a certain length of seat post in there. I did try fitting a longer seat post, so I managed to get a 150mm in there, which was much better. But it's still not 100% whether or not that would work with all sizes of the Intrigue. However, there are new crops of seat posts coming out now that do have shorter insertion lengths, so that could be something that you could sort out yourself afterwards. But it is a bit of a shame that you'd probably have to look at buying your own seat post after investing in this bike. So I know that sounds quite negative so far, and it's worth pointing out that that sizing issue will only affect certain riders. But I wanted to get that out of the way because most of all, I was won over by the ride feel of this bike. It's very, very capable. Now, I've already talked about how it felt for climbing, but obviously the important thing for a lot of people is how it feels on the flats and, of course, on descents. Despite those big numbers in terms of the suspension travel, this bike was actually surprisingly fun and agile to ride on flatter terrain. I think it's due partly to the position you have in the bike, which places you really in the frame, and a really active suspension system. I'm a big fan of Giant's Maestro suspension system, which is on this bike, which means that you can really work the terrain and get that free speed, so you can eke out a lot of fun even from something that doesn't really point downhill particularly much. This is not to say that it isn't fun when you go downhill. It is really good fun when you go downhill. I rode this bike in Squamish. I've ridden it on my local downhill tracks in the Forest of Dean. I've also taken it on my favourite trail ever, which is Lord of the Squirrels in Whistler. And it was an absolute scream from top to bottom. That feeling of being planted right in the centre of the bike meant that you could push through quite hard terrain. So you're rolling up and over rocks and down the other side, and the suspension reacted in just the right way to allow you to suck up those smaller bumps, but also not bottom out on some of those bigger hits. If I was to describe what it's like to ride this bike, I'd say that the bike feels very capable. You feel like you can really trust that suspension to work the ground, to eat up those smaller hits when you need it to, and then give you that twang, that acceleration when you ask for it. You can trust the tyres to give you the grip you need in the corners and on looser terrain and on wet grounds. And you can also trust those brakes to allow you subtle control of your speed when you need it. Altogether, that capable bike leads to a thrilling ride. It's really, really good fun. I found myself flying over terrain that I normally would maybe think twice about. I really got my flow together, linking sections together, and it's like riding a roller coaster on a machine that you really trust to take you down that mountain. And you push and the bike is there for you, and it was just so much fun. Despite the few significant flaws that I mentioned before, I really, really enjoyed riding this bike. I'd go so far as to say it's the best bike I've ridden this year in this category. So if you are in the market for something along these lines, then I would definitely make a date with your nearest Liv or Giant dealership to go along, check it out, take it for a test ride, and see how you get on with it. So what do you think? If you've got any questions or comments, then do pop them in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, or click on the bell so you get notified every time we pop a new video up.